Mr. Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to the Committee on Streets and Services hearing. Today is Wednesday, June 26th. I understand that the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Enquirer, Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I note that the hour has come. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called? Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen once you speak. Mr. Clerk.
Vice Chair Squilla.
I think. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Present.
Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. Councilmember Bass. Councilmember O. Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Johnston. Mr. Chair, without Councilmember Johnson, we currently lack a quorum.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm here in attendance. Curtis Jones.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones.
Councilmember Jones, you may know this procedure better. Is there a way we can add you to the committee?
Yes, the president.
Quickly?
If you can contact the president quickly, he can appoint me to the committee temporarily.
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson.
All right.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues.
And Chair Thomas.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called into order. This is a public hearing of the Committee on Streets and Services regarding bills number 210-710, 210-711, 210-712, 210-280, 210-326, 210-327, 210-451, 210.
I apologize. Please go ahead.
210-472, 210-502, 210-504, and 210-509. Bills number 210-478 and bill number 210-506 have been held at the request of the sponsor. Mr. Maynard, will you please read the titles of these bills?
Of course. Bill 200710, an ordinance amending Chapter 12, 2700 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Permit Parking Districts by amending the boundaries for certain permit parking districts and by establishing a new permit parking district, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 200711, an ordinance amending Section 12, 2705 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Issuance of Resident Parking Permits, to address the rules regarding issuance of resident parking permits, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 200712, an ordinance amending Section 12, 2705 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Issuance of Residence Parking Permits, to address the cost of resident parking permits for certain low-income individuals, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210280, an ordinance authorizing the procurement commissioner to enter into a contract for the construction of a sewer and appurtenant work required to provide public sewer service in the 1600 block of Olive Street. Bill 210326, an ordinance establishing no truck parking and tow zone regulations on both sides of Sackett Street from Cotman Avenue to Ryan Avenue. Bill 210327, an ordinance establishing no truck parking and tow-away zone regulations on both sides of St. Vincent Street from Sackett Street to Hawthorne Street. Bill 210451, an ordinance amending Chapter 10700 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Refuse and Littering by amending Section 10-719 entitled Penalties by revising the penalty to be assessed for violations of this chapter, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210472, an ordinance amending Chapter 12-2700 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Permit Parking Districts by amending the boundaries of Permit Parking District 16, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210478, as was announced, is being held. Bill 210502, an ordinance amending Section 12701 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Designation of Bicycle Lanes to authorize a bicycle lane on North 13th Street from Spring Garden Street to Green Street, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210504, an ordinance authorizing the revision of lines and grades on a portion of City Plan number 167 within the area bounded by 67th Street, Vine Street, 69th Street, and Haverford Avenue, by striking portions of certain streets from the City Plan, vacating portions of certain streets from the City Plan, and reserving and placing on the City Plan multiple rights-of-way for gas main purposes and public utility purposes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210506, as previously mentioned, is being held. And finally, Bill 210509, ordinance amending Title 12 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Traffic Code, by creating a new Chapter 123500, entitled Personal Delivery Devices, to regulate the operation of personal delivery devices within the City of Philadelphia, in certain circumstances, all under certain terms and conditions. These are the bills to be heard today by the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have before us today, everyone who's been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is now being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for the witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purposes. I would also like to note for the record that Councilmember Brooks, member of the committee, is also present. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the first witness we have to testify this morning, as well as the bill?
Mr. Chair, the first bill we'll hear on is Bill 210509. The first two witnesses we'll hear from are Chris Pachalski from Otis and Dion Bracely from the PPA, and we'll then hear public testimony on that same bill.
Mr. Chair, could I be recognized before we take witnesses on this bill?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill, Councilmember Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the Streets and Services Committee. Although I'm not a member of the committee, I am the sponsor of this bill. The concern regarding this bill, the PDD, or Personal Delivery Device Bill, this was legislation that was passed very quickly last year, signed into law by Governor Wolf. As president of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, we opposed this legislation because it really strips the ability of local jurisdictions like the City of Philadelphia to regulate its own streets, as well as vehicles that operate in our streets. Further, the county administration also was opposed to this, the personal delivery device legislation that was signed into law in Harrisburg, based on the similar concerns. The concern is that these items, or these personal delivery devices, although you may have seen commercials like on Domino's and others, I think these are small, somewhat benign devices that remind someone of a small little cart or wheelbarrow on a street. The legislation that was passed into law in Harrisburg has a much different perspective. These devices actually could be much large, quite large, in reference to the size as well as the speed that they can travel. plus under the legislation, they are defined as pedestrians and can move throughout our city at a very rapid pace, carrying a lot of bulk material. So for someone like myself, who has been an advocate for the disability community, I do have some concerns in reference to the ability of these type of vehicles to move around our city, and also the fact that if but for this type of legislation, these vehicles could just start appearing on city streets. They have a large size and go very fast, and constituents would have a concern and raise concerns why we as a city have not taken action to properly regulate these type of vehicles. And so, working with the administration, we're looking to do what we can to address this concern. However, the legislation as drafted was very strict in reference to what it does allow us at the local level to do. And so this is one step in trying to provide those type of oversight guidelines and safety for citizens within the city of Philadelphia. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Green, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. I, too, am concerned, and I am curious to hear the testimony of the witnesses as it relates to this particular legislation. Mr. Maynard, can you please call that panel again? Once your name is called, can you please just state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony. For members of the committee, we're going to let the entire panel testify first before we open it up for any questions. Mr. Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first two witnesses we'll hear from are Chris Pachelski from Otis and Dion Bracely from the PPA. Chris, if you're ready, please begin your testimony.
Yeah, good morning, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Christopher Pachelski. I am the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill 210509, and I would like to thank Councilmember Green for sponsoring this important piece of legislation. This bill authorizes the City of Philadelphia through the Streets Department to regulate the operation of personal delivery devices to the extent allowed by state law. Personal delivery devices, or PDDs, are small autonomous robots used for parcel and other small package deliveries, such as for takeout food. PDDs are being developed by several companies and are in operational trials in several American cities. Act 106 of 2020, that's Pennsylvania Act 106 of 2020, legalized PDDs in Pennsylvania and largely preempted municipalities from regulating their operation. Municipalities may ban operation on certain streets if deemed a hazard, but only under certain terms and conditions. An outright ban of operation inside the city would not survive legal challenge. While PDDs do offer certain benefits, less congestion, lower carbon emissions, and cheaper delivery services, they also present significant concerns at this early stage of development. Act 106 specified a maximum speed of 25 miles per hour on roads and 12 miles per hour on sidewalks, with a maximum weight of 550 pounds, and that's before packages are loaded onto the vehicle. This amount of momentum could create dangerous conditions on city sidewalks. Additionally, operation on narrow sidewalks and curb ramps could potentially create problems for residents with limited mobility or using wheelchairs. Because of the rapidly changing and technical nature of the situation, and because of the restrictions placed by Act 106, Otis believes that a regulatory approach is the best way to ensure that PDDs are not a hazard on Philadelphia's sidewalks and streets. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness for this panel?
Of course. The next witness to testify is Dion Bracely from the Philadelphia Parking Authority.
Good morning, Council. I did not submit testimony for this bill 210509. My name is Dion Bracely from the Philadelphia Parking Authority.
I apologize, Ms. Bracely. That's my error. In that case, the next witness to testify is Daniel Grace from Liberty Resources. Excuse me, no. Daniel Grace is the next person to testify, though.
Good morning, Chairman Thomas, members of City Council. My name's Daniel H. Grace. I'm the Secretary Treasurer at Teamsters Local 830. The recent legislation passed by the Pennsylvania legislature regarding personal delivery devices represents a major threat to all Philadelphians. While the Teamsters attempted to explain the massive workforce safety, liability, and equity issues to state legislators, our advice was not heeded and the issue is now on your plate. I'd like to walk through some of the largest issues that these devices raise for our community. As a labor leader, I'd like to start with the impact these devices will have on our community via the workforce. The International Brotherhood of Teamsters alone represents over 21,000 package delivery drivers in the Philadelphia area at companies like UPS and DHL. If the package delivery bots become mainstream in our community, that is 21,000 middle-class jobs that are gone or diminish, hurting Philadelphia families, local businesses, and decimating the city's tax base. We are nearly out of a pandemic that we got through in large due to the work of our package delivery drivers who are on the front lines every day making sure that Philadelphia stayed operational. Our Teamster members and other frontline workers delivered the groceries, medicine, essential goods, and vaccine that our community needed. To now turn around and automate these jobs with no protections for workers is unconscionable. There are serious safety concerns with these devices. The state law allows for PDDs to weigh up to 550 pounds plus cargo and move on our sidewalks at a rate of 12 miles per hour. This is a major safety concern for all citizens, but especially Philadelphia's children, senior citizens, and individuals with disabilities. To offer a comparison, I bring your attention to another major city that has dealt with this issue, San Francisco, California. In looking at San Francisco's public worker order number 187703, you will see that these kinds of devices are limited to 3 miles per hour on sidewalks. Compared to other states that have implemented these devices, Pennsylvania is near the top in both maximum weight and speed. Again, our comparison, our similar bill was introduced and defeated in Kansas this year, SB 161, where the proposed weight was 150 pounds with 6 miles per hour speed limit versus 550 and 12 miles per hour in PA. There are state legislatures, both Republican and Democratic, not moving this kind of legislation due to concerns about the devices that weigh less than half of what is being proposed here. I also bring to your attention to an incident at the University of Pittsburgh where the school was forced to pause a pilot program for these devices in 2019 after the device blocked a wheelchair-bound student in oncoming traffic while blocking the curb cut in the sidewalk. The device in question in Pitt incident was less than 100 pounds, much smaller than what has been now approved by the state legislature. Philadelphia citizens should not be the guinea pigs for the tech companies to test out how large and how fast these devices can go. Given this knowledge, we ask you to think about whether these devices are safe anywhere in this city. Another major issue is liability. Again, we look to San Francisco's public worker order number 187703 on delivery devices, which recommends a $1 million general liability policy in addition to automotive liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance. With the liability dollar amount in Pennsylvania, the truth is 1/10 of what is in San Francisco's order, only 100,000 compared to 1 million. Whether in a rural community or densely populated Philadelphia, the liability dollar amount is the same, although the risk of accidents, property damage, and death is obviously higher in a crowded city like Philadelphia. Again, we ask you to think about whether this artificial liability cap imposed by the state legislature makes it impossible for these devices to be safe anywhere in this city. Finally, there is a question of equity. Philadelphia sidewalks are not built nor designed to withstand the commercial-grade vehicles weighing nearly a half a ton. This is a very real question to consider of whether these devices damage sidewalks and where does that damage occur? To sidewalks that are already damaged in in our poorest neighborhoods. If the devices cannot operate on damaged sidewalks, do our poorest residents not get the benefits of these devices? Who ultimately pays for the ongoing damage? This is a very real possibility that these devices continue the already extreme trend of set of advantages and rules for wealthy, leaving nothing behind for our low-income residents. In conclusion, the state legislator has dropped an unresponsible, unvetted piece of legislation onto your lap and has, at the same time, limited your control on how to responsibly regulate this kind of technology. Even compared to states that have passed some kind of legislation on this topic, Pennsylvania remains one of the most hazardous states on this issue, given the extremely high weight limit paired with one of the highest speed limits, along with a low liability dollar amount. It is our position that given the workforce safety, liability, and equity issues these devices raise, that these devices pose a hazard to the entire city of Philadelphia, both physically and morally. Philadelphia has the opportunity to be an example to municipalities across the state that have had the issue forced on them without any input, and we encourage the city council to lead on this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Grace, for your testimony. It's good seeing you this morning, and also thank you for your tireless advocacy for workers in the city of Philadelphia. We appreciate you. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next witness?
The next witness the committee will hear from is Titania Markland, followed by Randy Labasso.
Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Hi, good morning. I am Titania Markland. I am a trained outreach coordinator for the Clean Air Council, Philadelphia's oldest environmental nonprofit dedicated to protecting everyone's right to clean air and a healthy environment, which includes being able to safely walk or roll along Philadelphia's sidewalks. I'm also a pedestrian advocate and work with Clean Air Council's volunteer pedestrian advocacy group, Feet First Philly, the only advocacy group in Philadelphia dedicated to protecting pedestrian rights. Personal delivery devices, or PPDs, only advance the bottom line of delivery companies through automation and endanger pedestrian mobility. Philadelphia prides itself as being a walkable city, and we congratulate City Council on taking this important action to maintain health, safety, and mobility of pedestrians in our city. But we acknowledge that more action must be taken to ensure pedestrian safety and mobility by rethinking curbside management altogether. Clean Air Council and Feed First Philly encourages City Council, Mayor Kenny, and city agencies, including Otis and the Philadelphia Parking Authority, to continue preserving and elevating pedestrian safety by tackling curbside management policies and creating dedicated on-street loading areas in commercial and residential areas. Crosswalks, sidewalks, and bike lanes are frequently being blocked by delivery trucks, impeding and imperiling all modes of transportation, particularly pedestrians. Personal delivery devices are not the solution, and will only make delivery congestion worse unless a comprehensive overview of curbside management is undertaken and a focused strategy that protects pedestrians is prioritized and put into law. The City of Philadelphia must support safer delivery methods that reduce the amount of space dedicated to walking and rolling. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next witness for this panel?
Of course. The next witness for the panel is Randy Labasso.
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Randy Labasso, and I'm the Policy Director of the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. We opposed this legislation in Harrisburg last year and signed on to a letter with other pedestrian, bicycle, and disability rights activists around the Commonwealth in opposition when this came up. The biggest problem the Bicycle Coalition sees with this legislation is that PDDs are basically allowed the same rights as pedestrians and arguably more. They can travel, as we've heard, they can travel up to 12 miles per hour and carry and weigh 550 pounds before cargo, which is about 3 times the limit the state of Washington allows their PDDs to carry. The quick passage of the legislation in Harrisburg left several issues unaddressed, many of which are being left up to PennDOT to decide in real time. Plenty of places around the world have personal delivery devices in use, but Pennsylvania passed the most pro-business legislation, essentially giving the robots more rights than human beings. Here in Philadelphia, with our small, crowded sidewalks, we need City Council to do everything it can to rein in this law and keep sidewalks for people. The legislation had a lot of money behind it. There wasn't much debate over it, and there was little fanfare to stop the legislation the day before it was signed. Part of what makes this a difficult issue to comment on today, in my opinion, is that the legislation is extremely vague. But here's what we do know, which we have already heard from some other witnesses, which is that these things can weigh up to 550 pounds, which means we're basically going to have refrigerators rolling down Chestnut Street, in addition to all the regular foot traffic. Number two, it's unclear how we will keep them from blocking sidewalks and ADA ramps, which is already a huge problem in the city, especially in the winter months. It's also unclear how they will react to people in wheelchairs, or children and dogs. The PDDs are allowed to ride on multi-use trails in addition to sidewalks. So that doesn't sound like a huge issue, but more and more side paths are connecting people to business districts in Philadelphia, like the new Delaware River Trail that's under construction, which connects directly to Rivers Casino. Lastly, they are allowed to go 12 miles per hour, which I can say is about as fast as I ride my bicycle on the road. So as many complaints as there are about people riding bikes on sidewalks, this legislation actually allows much larger, wider, and faster obstructions on those same sidewalks. Lastly, it should be noted that this legislation was opposed by most Democrats in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, who noted that it would hurt job creation throughout the state. And this is a legitimate issue. In addition to the obvious safety and space concerns posed by these robots, the delivery cyclists and drivers that have kept us all fed and safe at home around Philadelphia over the past year are potentially at risk with this legislation. Food delivery apps have boomed in the past year, keeping many bike messengers employed during the pandemic and allowed others to take on part-time jobs on their own schedule. So those are the sorts of jobs that would be quickly affected if these robots were allowed to operate in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next witness for this panel?
The next witness the panel will hear from is Thomas Earl from Liberty Resources.
Before Thomas goes, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Councilmember Bass is present in this hearing. Thomas, please state your name for the record and you may begin with your testimony.
Thomas Earl, and I am the CEO of Liberty Resources, which is the federally funded Center for Independent Living for Philadelphia. And our role includes advocacy to ensure independent living and the civil rights, including ADA access rights for people with disabilities. I am also legally blind from retinitis pigmentosa and have advocated with the blind community, including the American Council of the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind, on various rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I want to start just by mentioning that the city of Philadelphia already has very many challenges relating to curb cuts and sidewalks without personal delivery devices. The city sidewalks in many areas of the city are in dilapidated condition. Curb cuts are broken or non-existent. To begin adding additional use of pedestrian right-of-ways by non-pedestrians poses a huge danger to the disabled community. Personal delivery devices that weigh 550 pounds and can move at speeds up to 12 miles per hour is a recipe for a very dangerous accident. I can imagine myself walking down the street on Chestnut, Market, wherever it might be, with my cane and not see a personal delivery device coming at me and colliding with me or colliding with one of my colleagues who use wheelchairs, whether they're a manual wheelchair or a motorized wheelchair, the consequences would be disastrous and potentially fatal, especially parents with strollers and rolling down the street with a baby and colliding with a potential personal delivery device. Keep in mind that they weigh 550 pounds without the cargo. I'm not clear, or it's not clear to me, how much cargo can be loaded into one of these delivery devices. But let's say it's 500 pounds of boxes or 600 pounds of boxes, whatever it might be, the cargo capacity of the device, plus the 550 pounds of the device. We're talking about over 1,000 pounds of mass coming at you at 12 miles per hour, relying on technology that is not certain and notably not precise, colliding with pedestrians who might weigh 150 pounds, 250 pounds. Guess what? The personal delivery device is going to win that accident, just like a tractor trailer wins an accident against a small vehicle on the highway. We strongly support the bill that would limit or restrict the use of these devices on city sidewalks, and we fully support the city of Philadelphia having the ability to decide and limit where these devices can be used. I agree with my colleagues in labor that it also impacts the economics of the city and good paying jobs for our many working families who are involved in the delivery business, whether they are UPS drivers and other drivers and delivery drivers. These are important jobs that must be preserved and help our city continue on a path of improved prosperity. And I hope that City Council has the wisdom to pass Councilman Green's bill. I know it's supported by several sponsors already, and I really hope that these protections are put into place to safely help people with disabilities not be run over by personal delivery devices. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness for this panel?
That is the last witness to testify on this bill. The next bill we'll hear on is Bill 200710.
Okay, before we go to the next bill, are there any questions from members of this committee or members of council that are here present for this particular panel? Our chair recognizes Councilmember Green, who is present and the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all of the witnesses that testified on this panel regarding this legislation. As you can tell, based on the diversity of types of witnesses that testified this morning, a number of concerns and issues.
Councilmember Green, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we can't hear you that well. If you could speak up a little bit, it's a little hard to hear you.
Yeah, it could be the technology. Give me one. How about now?
Much better, Councilman Green. Thank you.
Multitasking in this COVID world, so thank you about that. As I was saying, is that based on the diversity of witnesses that testified this morning on this bill, a number of concerns have been raised, especially in reference to the way this legislation was passed very quickly in Harrisburg. But I do have a few questions for Mr. Pachowski from the administration. And my understanding that a personal delivery device, or PDD, there is a maximum weight of 500 pounds, but there's no maximum weight on the amount of cargo. So as a number of witnesses testified, and I think, as Mr. Labasso had stated, a refrigerator coming down a street or sidewalk. So I will make sure I understand, for my own edification and also for the witnesses, there's a maximum weight limit for a personal delivery device, but there's no max on the weight of the cargo. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. The state act specifies a maximum weight of 550 pounds of the vehicle, but no limit on the amount of cargo it can carry.
Okay, and also the maximum speed for a personal delivery device is 12 miles per hour on a sidewalk and 25 miles per hour on a street. And based on testimony from Mr. Grace, I believe that's quite faster speed than other jurisdictions where we've seen similar type of legislation.
Yeah, and I'll just say that while 25 on a roadway, might be keeping pace with your average speed on a Philadelphia street, 12 miles per hour is much faster than the average walking speed. The average walking speed is somewhere around 3 miles an hour.
And as the legislation was introduced and passed in Harrisburg in opposition to numerous cities and also in opposition to the administration, as the legislation was drafted, it basically preempts the city of Philadelphia or cities around the Commonwealth from restricting personal delivery devices unless they can demonstrate a hazard. Can you talk through the process of, based on your understanding and your conversations with PennDOT, how would a city like Philadelphia would identify a hazard, and what steps is your office taking now to identify streets within the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, thank you, sir. We have talked to PennDOT about this. We've also started doing preliminary analysis. We would look at a number of factors such as adjacent land uses, sidewalk widths, pedestrian volumes, in order to determine places where we would ban, we would deem it a hazard to operate, especially on the sidewalk of a given street. And just to be clear, this is on. We're only allowed by the state law to regulate on streets that are under our control, so not on the PennDOT roads. But we think it'll be effective if most of the city streets that we see, especially on the sidewalks, just initially it looks like a hazard. Just to make a point, though, somewhat awkwardly, the state law sets up a situation where we can't preemptively put in a ban. We have to meet with the company wishing to operate first.
And it's my understanding that Otis is in the process of looking at various streets around the city of Philadelphia, so that way you can identify those streets based on your observation would be considered a hazard, and using that map as a way to have that information readily apparent. As of this point, are you aware of any permit requests for the city of Philadelphia for any entities that would like to operate a personal delivery device in the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, no, we are aware of no permit requests. There is currently operation in the city of Pittsburgh on a trial basis. They had one trial and they're getting ready to start another trial. There are no current applications for operation in the city of Philadelphia. It's my sense that after getting this bill passed, some of the delivery companies temporarily shifted to focusing on COVID-related vaccine delivery, but that once that was over, that it was likely they were to get back to this initiative.
And then also, how would you engage the public? Because I think one of the concerns that I've thought about, and I think others have also thought, that the way the legislation is drafted, basically an operator could come and decide they want to operate a personal delivery device in the city of Philadelphia, and there really would not be that type of input from the public. And my concern is that how do we provide the opportunity for those in the city of Philadelphia to state that, their street where they live or nearby could be a possible hazard. I could think of a situation of a school or a library that's on a very heavily traveled area, or a school or library, other type of location like a recreation center that's not on a heavily traveled street, but a lot of people in that community may use that roadway, especially during certain hours of the day, like when school lets out, like 3 o'clock. So it may not be on a very busy street, but maybe on the afternoons, and most people in that immediate vicinity use that roadway or sidewalk pretty regularly in the afternoon, and that could cause a concern if this is a street removed from a more heavily traveled street, and now you're having these very large personal delivery devices possibly on a street that may be near a recreation center or a senior center or a library, and could impact those that have a physical or learning difference.
Yeah, we would hope to engage the public first through the rulemaking regulatory process to make sure that we're catching those locations in our initial set of ban list for any given operator. Furthermore, during any ongoing operations, we would want to make use of the 311 system to be nimble, so that if we, for whatever reason, miss a location that is causing a problem, you indicated some, possible temporal situations where it's only certain times of day. We would hope to, hear that through the 311 system, and then revisit and update any ban list based on what we're hearing if the devices are causing a problem.
And that's my last question. When do you think will be the timeline for when your office will be able to try to have at least a draft list of streets that you would consider as hazards within the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, I think, should the bill pass before the summer break, we would hope to have at least some initial set before the end of the summer. I think that depends on staffing need and what else is going on. And if we should hear of an operator wanting to come to town, we can accelerate that timeline if need be.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Petrowski. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. Are there any other members, are there any other questions from members of this committee for this panel on this particular legislation? Hearing none, I want to thank everybody on this panel for your testimony. Again, thank you to the sponsor of the bill. We appreciate your leadership, and we appreciate the dialogue. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next set of bills? Before we go on to witnesses, I want to allow the sponsor of the next set of bills to make a few remarks. Mr. Clerk?
The next bills we'll hear are bills 200710, 200711, and 200712. Dion Bracely from PPA will be testifying on all three, and Chris Pahalski from Otis will be testifying on 200712. Madam Councilmember.
Before
Thank you.
We come out of the panel, Chair recognizes Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all so much. I used to be the vice chair of this committee, and I forgot all of the work that needs to be done in a committee like this one. I want to thank Councilmember Green for addressing the particular issue of the previous bill, as we need to make sure accessibility throughout the city, at the same time looking at the future workforce challenges that we face. So I want to thank him for that. The next set of bills has been part of our work, as all of you know. Particularly in changing and gentrifying neighborhoods, there's this constant pressure between long-term fixed income residents and some of the new developments. I represent 10 L stops, and we have tried to incentivize and encourage dense development as a way of obtaining affordability. But with that comes many, many challenges. I have been working with 6 RCOs in South Kensington over the last year and a half on many zoning-related land use issues. We just completed a corrective zoning map to help provide predictability and at the same time allow residents to have a say in the types of amenities and developments they want in their neighborhood. As part of that process, there were 12 agenda items that are not zoning based, but that do impact the quality of life and development in the neighborhood. The 3 bills before you are one of the issues: parking around transportation centers, parking with high impact developments coming in the community. I want to thank the law department, the Philadelphia Parking Authority, and our Otis department that you'll hear from for working with our office around these bills. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to strike a balance between residents' need for parking, high density impact, and at the same time ensuring that long-term residents on fixed incomes do not feel displaced when they have to be part and participate on residential parking situations to allow the development along the transportation center to continue. So Bill 200710 allows for the 7th Councilmatic District to create its own parking grid as a pilot. This is necessary because we are in the middle of Fishtown, Northern Liberties, and the Temple development area. And what we see many, many times is people who have parking permits in those zones, parking long-term in parking zones in our district, and many times spending the whole weekend Ubering while they park in front of someone's home. And this is one of the ways we want to address that, to create a zone and a pilot so that we can test several things. What doesn't work, we will modify, but at least try to address some of these issues. Bill 200711, this is an important piece of the debate around how high impact businesses, mixed developments come in the neighborhood. We have many developments who provide on-site parking, but we have discovered that residential parking permits are cheaper. So folks move into these high-rise developments and don't want to utilize the parking provided by the developments, but then get the parking permit on off streets. And so one of the areas that the RCOs identify as problematic was that. Again, this is a pilot that we will be working with the Parking Authority and Otis. This would limit the ability for folks to get a much cheaper parking option when on-site parking is provided. And finally, Bill 200712, one of the things that we heard from our seniors and people, long-term residents on fixed income was, I've lived here all my life. I can't go to a doctor's appointment because someone takes my parking spot. And we wanted to provide a low-income option for these residents. We want to thank Revenue and, again, the Law Department and Parking Authority for working with us on this, as we will tie in an affordable parking permit along with some of our other residential options, income-based programs like TAP and other things to permit, again, seniors and fixed income folks for getting one permit based on income, but then also offsetting that with an increase for second, third cars. Again, this is a pilot. I want to thank the Law Department, Revenue, Otis, and the Parking Authority. We will be working with them on promulgating regulations for its implementation in the next 180 days after the bill passes. And so I thank the committee for its consideration. I thank all the folks who have worked with us. And I look forward, again, to piloting something that may help us balance out some of the issues related to high impact affordability as communities get developed, like the one in South Kensington. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. It's an important conversation that we must have, and it's one of those things that sometimes get brushed under the rug with all the other issues that we're fighting on a consistent basis. So thank you. Mr. Maynard, can you please call the first panel for this particular legislation? When your name is called, and your time to testify is here, make sure you say your name for the record. And also for members of this committee, we will allow the entire panel to testify before taking questions. Mr. Maynard.
So the first witness we're going to hear from is Chris Pahalski from Otis, in order to let him then head to a different set of meetings. Chris, if you can begin.
Yeah, hello. I will testify on 711 and then 712. Good morning, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Chris Pahalski. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at Otis. I'm here first to offer testimony on 200711. I'll say, as dense, older city built around walking and transit, Philadelphia faces numerous parking challenges. Bill 200711 proposes one method of solving the challenge of increasing the supply of housing without disrupting the quality of life for long-time residents. Otis appreciates the willingness of Councilmember Kiona Sanchez to pilot innovative parking policies. Otis does not oppose 200711. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Now, moving on to 712. Here to offer testimony on 200712, which seeks to amend Section 122705 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Issuance of Residential Parking Permits, to address the cost of residential parking permits for certain low-income individuals. I'd sincerely like to thank Councilmember Kiona Sanchez and her staff for the discussion and negotiations on this bill over the last week. Otis supports the intent of this bill, but the current version has several issues. Otis cannot support the current version, but looks forward to continuing discussions on the bill related to both the policy and administrative issues. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness for this bill?
The next witness for this group of bills is Dion Bracely from the PPA. Ms. Bracely, if you can testify in order on 710, 711, and 712, that would be great.
Good day, Council. My name is Dion Bracely, Deputy Manager for the Philadelphia Parking Authority. Thank you for allowing me to testify before Council regarding ordinances 710, 200710, 200711, 200712, entitled Permit Parking District and Issuance of Resident Permit Parking. My testimony requested the amendment submitted to the bills read. Therefore, I rescind my testimony, and I want to thank Councilman Sanchez for the amendment indicating that the bills are effective in 180 days. Thank you again. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness for this panel?
That concludes the witnesses for this panel.
Are there any questions from members of this committee for this particular panel? I'm thinking about the bill co-sponsor first. Councilmember Sanchez, do you have any questions or comments for this particular panel?
No, I just want to again thank the departments, and I'll continue to work through the departments in the implementation phase. Again, this is a pilot, and it's one of many toolboxes we need to manage the conversations around neighborhoods that are redeveloping, and I look forward to working with all of the departments involved, and I want to thank them for working with my office, with Andy Rendon in my office, and our legal team to through this process. And all of you know I'm into the operationalizing it. I want to make sure it works, and I want to make sure I work with the departments so that this is seamless. Thank you, and I thank the committee for its consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other members from this committee have questions on this particular bill? Hearing none, Mr. Main, I want to thank all the panelists for your testimony today, and again, thank you, Councilmember Sanchez, for your leadership. Mr. Clerk, can you please read the next bill and call the next panel?
The next bill we'll hear is Bill 210472, and Dion Bracely from PPA is the sole witness on this bill.
Good day, Council. My name is Dion Bracely, Deputy Manager for the Philadelphia Parking Authority. Thank you for allowing me to testify before Council regarding Ordinance 200472 entitled entitled Permit Parking District. The Philadelphia Parking Authority has no objection to the ordinance previously read before council and recommends favorable consideration. Thank you again for your time. I will be happy to respond to questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Clerk, you said that was the only witness for this particular panel. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Before I open it up to the committee, I know that at one point the bill sponsor was in the hearing today, Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Jones, if you're here, I don't know if you want to make a few remarks about the bill. If you would like to, please queue yourself up. Are there any questions from other members of the committee for this particular panel on this legislation?
Mr. Chair?
Chair recognizes Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, there are no questions for this bill, but I have another bill coming up where I would like to comment on a street striking, I believe it is.
Okay. We got you, Mr.
Jones. That'll be coming up in just a few bills. We should get to it relatively quickly.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, hearing there are no other questions from members of this committee for this particular panel on this bill, Mr. Clerk, I ask that you please read the next bill.
The next bill we'll hear on is Bill 210280, and Laura Copeland from the Philadelphia Water Department is our sole witness to testify.
Please say your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Sure, my name is Laura Copeland. Good morning, Chairman Thomas and members of the Committee on Streets and Services. I am Laura Copeland, Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Education, Community Engagement, and Government Affairs for the Philadelphia Water Department. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 210280, sponsored by Council President Clark, authorizing the Procurement Commissioner to enter into a contract for the construction of a sewer and pertinent work required to provide public sewer service in the 1600 block of Olive Street. The properties on the 1600 block of Olive Street are currently served by a private sewer. The location of the private sewer and the customer's private laterals are in the rear of their homes or run through other properties' basements. These pipes are not accessible by the city or the property owners for maintenance or repair. This situation, with the private laterals running through the basements of neighboring houses, has resulted in unsanitary conditions within those basements. Installation of a public sewer and connection of those properties currently served by the private sewer will resolve the unsanitary conditions. In accordance with the Philadelphia Code, impacted residents on the 1600 block of Olive Street will be assessed for the installation of the new sewer. These charges will be billed to the individual property owners' existing water, sewer, and stormwater accounts. PWD respectfully requests that this bill be reported favorably out of this committee and that the rules of council be suspended to allow for the first reading of this bill at the next session of City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness for this bill?
Mr. Chair, that is the only witness for this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any questions from members of this committee or council members present for this particular panel? Hearing none, I want to thank you for your testimony here today. We appreciate your insight. Mr. Clerk, can you please read the next bill and call the next panel?
The next bill we'll hear, Mr. Chair, is 210502, and Jeanette Bruger from Otis is our sole witness.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Jeanette Bruger, and I am the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator in the Office of Complete Streets in the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. I'm here today to offer testimony in support of Bill number 210502. This bill will authorize the removal of one block of no stopping anytime curbside space on the west side of North 13th Street from Spring Garden Street to Green Street. This 2-block section will extend the continuous northbound bike lane that exists today from South Street to Spring Garden Street. Constructing this 2-block bikeway link is consistent with the Philadelphia 2035 Comprehensive Plan, Connect Philadelphia's Strategic Transportation Plan, and the city's pedestrian and bicycle plan. This bikeway provides a safe, sustainable, and healthy transportation option for people of all ages and abilities. There is demonstrated support for this project from the 14th Ward Community Group and the adjacent Parkway Center City School. The Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability coordinated on this bill with the Department of Streets and the Office of Council President Clark. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Are there any questions from members of the committee or council members present for this panel on this particular bill? Hearing none, I want to say thank you again for your testimony. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, can you please call read the next bill and call the next set of witnesses?
Of course. The next bill we'll hear is Bill 210451. Keith Warren from Streets is the sole witness to testify on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Thomas, members of the Street Service Committee. My name is Keith Warren. I am the Deputy Commissioner of Streets for Sanitation Operations. I'm pleased to be here to testify on Bill number 210451, authorizing an increase to short dumping fines from $300 to $1,000, sponsored by Councilman O'Neill. As you know, illegal dumping is a quality of life issue that negatively impacts our cities and communities. It is normally ranked high in the city's residential survey of most pressing issues facing our city. It contributes to the decrease of property values and neighborhood appearances and leads to other crimes that affect quality of life. Illegal dumping is not only a detriment to our community, but also places a severe financial burden on the city. The Streets Department spends annually $1.8 million cleaning up and removing illegally dumped materials. Our sanitation crews routinely service the same sites requiring removal of discarded materials such as construction debris, mattresses, tires, televisions, and other items from vacant lots and desolate corridors and under bridges and underpasses in places not normally having high volumes of traffic. During the pandemic, the city experienced an increased illegal dumping, with many more people spending time at home and doing DIY projects. We've seen the tonnages of short dumping increase to about 30%, which also mirrored the increased tonnage of our daily trash collection and recycle removal. Many of these materials are being improperly disposed of outside of homes, and we have seen an increase of residential trash being dumped illegally, as well as these building materials under bridges and remote areas. As a result, increased our dumping annually disposal costs to $10.8 million. During the early phase of the pandemic, we had to temporarily suspend sweep enforcement efforts. This significantly impacted illegal dumping because the dumpers were aware that enforcement became even more strenuous than it normally is. While our sweep officers have returned to full duty deployment and citing violators for dumping, the dumpers have become more brazen, and the acts of and amounts of illegal dumping have increased to widespread areas across the city. To date, the Streets Department has installed a total of 250 illegal dumping cameras to catch violators. We have had success in many of the locations that we are monitoring. Less dumping has been disposed of in these spots. We continue to install cameras to known hotspots as part of a program to seek out and capture illegal dumpers. But the dumpers are becoming more savvy and adjusting to our enforcement efforts. We must take every effort to deter this epidemic of illegal dumping that's plaguing our city. That's why the Streets Department wholeheartedly supports this bill to increase illegal dumping fines from $300 to $1,000. It's critical that we work together to increase enforcement efforts, revamp legislations, and find better ways to hold violators accountable for their harmful illegal actions. We thank you for introducing this bill, increasing the fines of environmental crimes such as illegal dumping, and sends a clear message that polluting our neighborhoods and city with illegal dumping will not be tolerated, and that severe enforcement measures will be taken when we catch those in the act. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and support this bill.
Thank you. Before you go, I have a few questions. Before you go, I have a few questions real quick. You said you guys have installed 250 cameras across the city of Philadelphia to address this issue of illegal dumping. Where are those cameras installed? Can you get us where those cameras are installed and how you pick those locations? I've been doing a number of different initiatives across the city, including the cleanup we did earlier. And we were in the Germantown section, and one of the concerns that was communicated to us in the Germantown section was this issue of illegal dumping, and there not being enough cameras to address this issue. One of the things that I was informed that people were encouraged to do was to purchase the cameras themselves and be forced to forward that information to us. So I know you might not have this information readily available right now, but I would like to know where those 250 cameras are located. I would like to see them by councilmatic district, and I would also like to know how we pick those areas. Mr. Warren, is that okay?
Yes, I can certainly get you the list forwarded to you where we install illegal dumping cameras. They are added to a citywide network of cameras that involve the police, SEPTA, other agencies. So there's a network, but of that network, 250 of them were installed specifically for illegal dumping. We are increasing that network on our own by about 50 cameras per year. Some council members have contributed funds to us to help us grow that number of installation. It's driven by the most significantly frequently dumped on spots, and we're working our way backwards. We hope to have the whole city covered eventually. It involves some infrastructure, some fiber cables have to be laid, and some other IT stuff. So we can't necessarily put them where we want them exactly at all times, but it is our plan to do 50 a year on our own budget. Yeah, and we encourage.
We would want to see that. We would want to see that plan. I'm very skeptical when I think about some of the places that I know. Again, we just did a cleanup this past weekend that have been reoccurring sites for illegal dumping. I'm wondering, how do you put cameras in some of these places that don't have any buildings near them? So where would the cameras go? What would that look like? I have a ton of questions on this issue. First of all, I want to thank the sponsor of the bill, Councilmember O'Neill, because I agree with this bill and I will be voting in favor of it. But I do think we need to have an ongoing conversation about this illegal dumping issue and what is being done as it relates to the streets department. I'm going to stop right there because I'm the chair of the committee and I want to allow my colleagues to ask questions that they may have. So the chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Deputy Commissioner Keith Warren, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your hard work, your dedication, and your leadership as it relates to sanitation and addressing the issue of illegal dumping throughout the city of Philadelphia, but more specifically in the 2nd Councilmatic District. And so I want to take the time to publicly acknowledge that your efforts have been Herculean in addressing this issue, because at the end of the day, no matter how many times I have called you out in the Eastwick part of my district, we still have individuals who still prey on our communities by bringing down the quality of life of our communities by illegal dumping. And so I have a couple questions that I want to ask, and following up along the lines of the chairman's questions. I know we're looking at expanding cameras, right? And so I want to get an idea of how effective are cameras when it comes to enforcement and deterring illegal dumping. And so the camera is there, but tell me the follow-up. Who's monitoring the cameras? How many people are fined for illegal dumping based upon pulling information from the cameras? Give me an idea of how many people have been fined over the last 4 to 5 years. Who's monitoring the cameras? How often does that process actually takes place?
So the short dump cameras are monitored by the streets department. I have a team that monitors cameras 16 hours a day, but they record 24 hours a day. The camera network is monitored in the divot in the traffic center, and they have the police monitor on a different pace, and the traffic folks monitor on a different pace, but they're all tied into one network. But the short dumping cameras specifically are monitored 16 hours a day, and then we review the footage from the other 8 hours a day. What happens after we catch somebody? Well, that's the tricky part, because the threshold for arresting and finding somebody for short dumping is very high, very high. There's a high threshold. What we do is take anything that's actionable, and we turn it over to the police. And sometimes we turn it over to the inspector general based on the nature of the dumping. And we've had some success with that process. But it's a tremendous lift, because even if the police find something that they think can be prosecuted, then they have to take it to the DA and they make the final determination. So I don't have the numbers in front of me of how many cases have been prosecuted fully, but I can get that information and give it back to you. I will tell you that the cameras are, from my perspective, as a person cleaning up short dumping, are more of a deterrent. There are people who see them and then they think better of dumping. So they're more of a deterrent than a tool that where we're actually having people arrested and prosecuted. But we are working in a subcommittee through all the enforcement agents in the city to try to put more teeth into that part of it. But I can forward the numbers to you.
I'm sorry, this is Councilmember Thomas. Just for clarity purposes, and I'm sorry to interrupt, what do you mean that they're used more of a deterrent, right? Like, so are we saying that we're expecting that people know the camera is there and will say, oh, there's a camera here, so I'm not going to dump illegally here? Is that what we're suggesting?
Yeah, that does happen. With places where we have put cameras, we've seen decreased dumping. But when we capture video of people dumping, it's a very specific set of check boxes that have to be checked off before somebody can be prosecuted based on what the police and the DA have to take to court. But again, we still put cameras up in spots where there's a lot of dumping, because it does deter people. When they see that camera, we notice that the dumping has decreased. Yeah.
Okay, so as the chair of the committee, I just want to reiterate what Councilmember Johnson said, his request when he asked for like how many people are actually being fined and how effective these cameras are. I think that what you just communicated to me specifically is very concerning. I don't know if this is the most effective way to spend millions of dollars to monitor an area to catch people doing things illegal, where we're suggesting that once we catch them, we can't guarantee that there will be some level of consequence. So I just wanted to make sure that we clarify that for the record. Councilmember Johnson, I'm sorry, I'll return it.
Point of information. Mr.
I'm sorry, Chair recognizes Councilmember Jones.
And thank you, Mr. Johnson, Member Johnson, for allowing my point of information. There is a notorious short dumping street called Marion Avenue in West Philly. It runs from Girard Avenue to 52nd Street. And everything from trash to dead bodies had been found on Marion Avenue. And at one point, there was a short dumping of approximately, and Commissioner Warren, you may remember, close to 100 tires on that back street. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And we were able to find out allegedly who dumped those tires. And when I asked the guy, well, why do you continue to short dump? Why do you know we're going to keep coming out? The two reasons he said was because we're going to clean it up, and it is cheaper to accept the fine versus the dumping fee that it would cost to get rid of those tires. And it's just mathematics. And so you work very hard. I must call you 100 times a year about Marion Avenue. But people keep coming and keep dumping because of those business decisions and mathematics. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Johnson, did you want to continue your line of questioning? We apologize.
No, that's okay, because this is all good information as we move forward, and I think we're all rolling in the right direction around this issue. And so, Mr. Warren, if you could provide that information, that would be helpful. I do understand the concept of the cameras serving as a deterrent from the perspective that if somebody see that camera, they may think once or twice before they decide to actually do the dumping. And so I do understand that aspect, but I just also want to make sure that in the event that an individual is caught, that person is prosecuted to the full extent of the law, simply for the fact that, as Councilman Jones just mentioned, a lot of these individuals, right, from an economical standpoint, understand that, and you know this already, Keith, that it's easier to dump and get it cleaned up by the city as opposed to taking it to the dump site where you have to pay. And a lot of times, mainly contractors, for the most part, who are engaged, not all the time, but for the most part, at least in my district, in Eastwick, are individuals who find back alleyways or areas where it is dark, where there's a bunch of trees and no lighting to dump. And I'm calling you, and I will say for the record, you and your team, and hopefully, I can't speak for all the other districts, but I'm sure y'all do it. But elaborate on the new task force that has been established by Carlton Williams that allow community people to be at the table to help address quality of life issues around illegal dumping. And then also, Keith, don't be shy. Talk about how y'all have I know in my district, y'all have a process where y'all have particularly the hotspot, the illegal dumping hotspots. Y'all have a system where your team go out every so often to check those sites to remove the illegal dumping. Elaborate just for the record on that particular program.
Okay, so let me try to back up, and maybe I can hopefully answer some of Councilman Thomas' questions here. The cameras are a deterrent, but we are finding people, and we have a process which has a lower threshold where we get restitution when we do cleanups, which is what generally happens. To prosecute somebody, the DA has a standard of law where they can prosecute somebody, and I wouldn't be able to say I can speak intelligently about what all that entails, but we turn over everything we get to them. It doesn't always get prosecuted. So I just want to make that clear. We do monitor cameras. We do go after each and every person that we see. Again, the dumpers are savvy. They don't wear identifying clothing. You can't get a picture of their license plate. Their vehicle doesn't have a name on the side. So it's a tough battle to identify them. But when we do identify them, or we get a pattern, a dumper with a pattern, we sit on them and catch them in the act. And we've had some success. I just don't know what those numbers are, but it's not a catch-all, be-all. The way what Councilman Johnson was referring to, the hot spots and how we determine where the cameras are going to go is the spots where people frequently dump. We have a list of hot spots that we call the Dirty 30. In actuality, it's probably up to about 50 locations since the pandemic started. But those are known spots. Marion Avenue is one of those spots, as Councilman Jones spoke about, that as fast as we clean it up, somebody's dumping there again. He said to me earlier that I remember the 100 tires. I remember because we took another 100 or so off of there about 4 days ago. Those spots are frequently dumped, and people know that we clean those spots, and they come there and they dump, and they look at dumping as part of the fees that they pay when we do catch them as the cost of doing business, which is why we're here today hoping that the fines get increased to make the penalty for doing it more than the cost of cleaning, disposing of it properly yourself. That's the spirit of what we're trying to do with the legislation. We're trying to make hopefully make the fines when we catch people stringent enough that the next time they will go and legally pay to dispose of what they're dumping. And so,
And I just want to wrap up on this one last part, if that's okay, Mr. Chair, for the sake of timing. One, I just want to acknowledge, I think that the increasing the fines is great, so I want to say good job to the sponsor of the bill, Councilman O'Neill. And then also, I hope that as we move forward, maybe the part of our strategy, Keith, would be, maybe a campaign in partnership with the community to encourage community members to, take pictures when they see people illegal dumping, and maybe a process where the police and the DA's office is working in partnership with streets to filter that information. And then the other part is, I'm a big fan of, if you're caught dumping and you have a business, your business privilege license should be suspended from the city of Philadelphia forever. Period. Like, not have the opportunity to do business with our city anymore. And the reason why we have to take those type of drastic measures is because at the end of the day, this issue of illegal dumping is a public health epidemic, and is tearing up the quality of life of our neighborhoods across the city of Philadelphia. And if we don't respond accordingly, then we're going to continue to see same people doing the same thing that they already have been doing in the past. And obviously, if we don't change, then we're going to always see the same results. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Chair recognizes Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too wanted to kind of weigh in a little bit around this issue, and I thank this bill sponsor, Councilman O'Neill, for increasing the fines. This is about toolboxes that we can establish. We've been working with the Streets Department and the Police Department, because all of you know that the dumping aligns with blight and then aligns with public safety. So it's really important that when we're looking at this work, we're being very strategic about the fact that there's a connection, an intersection with all of those pieces. So we have, as in my district in particular, because of our challenges in Kensington, really have worked with the Police Department, Streets Department to provide them with as many cameras as necessary to help us navigate that. But and I hope the fines will be helpful. But ultimately, and Mr. Chair, as chairs of this committee, we need to have a bigger conversation around going back to some of the services we provided in the past that we eliminated or modified, which was, bulk trash at home. Particularly during this pandemic, we saw people were making home improvements and some of those other issues. We used to pick that up before, right? And the Streets Department has aligned its budget based on the resources we've given it. I subscribe to you that we are now at a place where deliveries are going to continue to increase. Home improvement is going to continue to be an issue, and we should be encouraging people to make those home improvements, but should begin to have a conversation around litter, our litter indexes, and then our ability to modify and go back to some of those services that I believe helped us get a better handle on our trash situation. The bad actors are the bad actors, and that's why we're here fighting them. But they're also realistically home improvement and other situations where folks don't have access to go to the dumpsters and they don't have those things. So it's about that broader conversation. In particular for districts like mine, I know that just like Councilman Jones, we're always tapping the department, and they do the best they can in responding. But we need to take a breather and step back and say we need all the toolboxes, cameras, fines, but we also need to look at the reality of what a COVID world looks like and respond accordingly. Because I think, if we can't get public safety and sanitation right in the city, it doesn't matter what else we do. People are frustrated with us. And I think it's time for us, and I know this budget enhances the Streets Department budget to a certain degree, and that we're going to go back to some of the street cleaning. But I would say that bulk pickup is also something that has to be reconsidered in the future as we move forward. But thank you to the Streets Department. Thank you for all their team for doing what you can with what you have. And folks have worked incredibly hard. But now we got to take a big picture view around how we want this department to help us improve the quality of life for folks. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. I appreciate the commentary. I think you're spot on. We're going to take note of what you said around bulk trash and make sure that we work with the commissioners to be able to do something about that. And thank you, Commissioner Warren, for being here today, and the entire department. Like the other council members said, I too and my team call on you guys often, and you often deliver for us. So We appreciate the support, and we look forward to continuing this conversation as well as working with you in the future. So thank you for being here today. And of course, thank you to the bill sponsor, Councilmember O'Neill, for taking leadership on this issue and creating a dialogue.
Thank you for allowing me to testify, Chairman Thomas. And I just do want to make one quick note about our citywide task force that the commissioner did establish, which partners with community groups and stakeholders to address these quality of life and blight issues. It meets monthly, and we take input and from the community and from council office about where we should be better concentrating our efforts. Back to what you're saying, how the spots are picked. We do encourage the public to report illegal short dumping, keeping in mind to say, please don't engage those people. That's for the police, but any information you can pass forward, time of day that is happening, type of vehicles that's using, license plates if you can get it, description of the individuals doing it. We encourage those things short of you, the public, engaging a short dumper themselves, putting yourselves in harm's way. We ask that you not do that, but we gladly take all the information that we can get to try to combat those short dumpers. And I want to publicly thank Councilwoman Sanchez, Councilman Squilla, President Clark, Councilman Jones, Councilwoman Gauthier, Councilwoman Richardson, and Councilman Johnson for sponsoring cameras in their districts, which went a long way to help us get to the network we're trying to build. Without that help from City Council, our budget just can't support. Those cameras are $6,000 a piece, and the installation is even another $1,500 more, I think. So all of those council people in the whole council, the two councilmen, Thomas, all of us, been very helpful in helping us to build the network faster than our budget would allow us, and hopefully deterrent will lead to elimination of short dumping. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We appreciate your testimony, and thank you for the commentary. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness, the next panel for the next bill? I'm sorry.
The next bill we'll hear on is Bill 210504. And before I call the witnesses, the sponsor of the bill had indicated he wanted to speak. Councilmember Jones?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want you to excuse my track suit because I have come out of retirement. I used to be a track coach, Member Thomas, and I've been convinced to this summer volunteer my time to do some of that. So we're going to have our first practice this afternoon. So I'm excited. You know how that is. But I wanted to rise today, Mr. Chairman, to talk about this bill. Otherwise, it would be nondescript ordinance that strike the street, but its connectivity to what I think something that you hold near and dear is to ACES charter, Philadelphia, West Philly ACES charter, which is an African-American owned charter school, which is making a remarkable difference in my district and throughout the city. They have a waiting list of people looking to get into that school and need to make plans for expansion. So the striking of that street leads to an expansion. The expansion leads to more bodies that are able to take advantage of their unique presentation of educational information. I think it's also important that their location there is right adjacent, Member Thomas, to a golf course. We're putting close to $60 million, not of city dollars, but of private dollars into that golf course. At that golf course, they have decided to sponsor a team at West Philly ACES Charter School. They have also agreed to take 5 students from their school a year to train them on golf course management so that they can learn not just how to be a caddy, but caddies make a lot of money these days, but how to tend to the shrubbery and deal with insecticides and deal with how to make sure that shrubbery is maintained. So all of these benefits come from a nondescript piece of ordinance that's under your committee that isn't sexy. You're not going to get it on the front page of the paper, but to the students in that area, it's life-changing. And so I wanted to thank you for agreeing to be chair of this committee or being drafted, whichever way you tend to look at it, but to make sure that everybody knows that this is the work that matters day to day. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones, and thank you for your leadership. One of the things I say all the time when we do this work is we'll never be able to quantify how many lives we save by the decisions that we make. This is just another example of that. So thank you. Thank you. Some young person will benefit years from now from this, and they don't even know it. So thank you, Councilmember Jones. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the first panel for this particular bill?
The clerk calls Noel Marconi from Streets and Sarah Chu from Planning, and congratulates Councilmember Jones for taking up the tracksuit and whistle.
Good morning, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noelle Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here to offer testimony on Bill Number 210504, introduced by Councilmember Jones. This is not an administration ordinance, but an ordinance requested by Peter Kelson, Esquire of Blank Rome LLP, representing West Philadelphia Achievement Charter Elementary School. The purpose of this proposed bill is to authorize the striking from the city plan and vacating the legally open portion of Calla Hill Street from 67th Street to 68th Street, and the striking and vacating of 68th Street from Girard Avenue to Calla Hill Street. 68th Street is not paved or in use by public traffic, and Calla Hill Street extends to a dead end. A right-of-way for gas main purposes within a portion of 68th Street and a right-of-way for gas main and public utility purposes within a portion of Calla Hill Street will be reserved to encompass existing underground utilities and overhead wires, which will remain in place. This action has been requested by the adjacent West Philadelphia Achievement Charter Elementary School to clear land area for a proposed expansion and improvement of the existing school buildings. Several additional unopened and unimproved streets lying wholly within the lands of Cobbs Creek Park, owned by the city, are also proposed to be stricken in order to avoid dead-end streets on the city plan. This ordinance is supported by the Department of Streets and is recommended to your committee for favorable action. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Please, for the next panelist, please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Good morning, Chair Member Thomas and members of the Committee on Streets and Services. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on Bill Number 210504, which was introduced by Councilmember Jones on May 27, 2021. Bill Number 210504 authorizes striking and vacating the legally portion of Calla Hill Street from 68th Street to 67th Street, striking and vacating 68th Street from Girard Avenue to Calla Hill Street, and strike Girard Avenue from 68th Street to 69th Street, and strike Calla Hill Street from 68th Street to 69th Street, and strike 67th Street from Calla Hill to Vine. This bill was requested by West Philadelphia Achievement Charter Elementary School as they're sitting on 6700 block of Calla Hill Street. It is currently dead-end street, which only abuts the school and adjacent public golf course. There are no outlets to the streets, and 68th Street is a non-improved paper street that is not used by either adjacent property owner for access. Other streets mentioned in this legislation are non-improved paper streets as well. The Planning Commission at its meeting of June 10, 2021 recommended Bill Number 210504 for approval. This concludes my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of council or members of this committee that's present today for this particular panel? Hearing none, I want to say again, thank you, Councilmember Jones, for your leadership, and please make sure you stretch before you go out there with the young people. We don't you can't call in injured to council. So, make sure you're safe out there. Thank you for your leadership. We appreciate all the work you're doing. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next panel for the next bill?
The next two bills we'll hear are the final two bills that the committee will hear today. They are bills 210326 and 210327. The sole witness on both bills is Noel Marconi from the Streets Department.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. If you could just say your name for the record and begin with your consecutive testimony, we definitely appreciate it.
Good morning, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210326, introduced by Councilmember Heenan. This ordinance establishes no truck parking and tow-away zone regulations on both sides of Sackett Street from Cottman Avenue to Ryan Avenue. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulations can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good morning, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210327, introduced by Councilmember Heenan. This ordinance establishes no truck parking and tow-away zone regulations on both sides of St. Vincent Street from Sackett Street to Hawthorne Street. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulations can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee or council members present in this panel on this particular bill, or these bills? I apologize. Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next panel?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the bills to be heard by the Streets Committee for this hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any other questions or comments from members of this committee? There being none, Mr. Maynard, no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. There being no further questions and comments from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I will ask if there is anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on any of the bills being considered today. Hearing none, I want to thank all of the panelists and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. I now invite all of the panelists and witnesses to please disconnect from the public meeting before we go into the please disconnect from the meeting before we go into the public meeting. We will now pause the proceedings briefly as multiple participants leave the hearing. I'm going to give folks a couple minutes. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now go into the public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bills before the committee today. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called? Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image is displayed on the screen when you speak. Mr. Maynard.
Vice Chair Squilla. Vice Chair Squilla. Councilmember Bass. Councilmember O. Councilmember Brooks.
But not realizing
Hello,
even though it's 30
I'm
votes, they move like one vote.
Just a moment. Okay, Councilmember Brooks.
They lose.
Hello, I'm
And
present.
so,
Can you hear me?
Excuse me for that. I'm a little.
Sounds like there's some type of glitch.
No, we're good. Matt, Mr. Clerk, can you please continue to call the roll?
Of course. Councilmember Johnson.
Present, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
I'm present, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Thank you so much.
And Chair Thomas.
I'm present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee members is present. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a single motion to approve the amendments to the bills that are being considered today. Councilmember Squilla is currently not available. Councilmember
Johnson?
Councilmember Johnson, are you available? Can we sing you? Can you offer the amendment? Can you do that?
Yeah, if you send them to me, I'll do it.
Councilmember Johnson, what I'm going to do is throw the bill numbers in the, actually, yeah, I'll alter the script. We're going to pause for just a minute, and I will send you an altered script that you can then read from.
All right, Mr. Clerk, so what we'll do is we'll just pause for a minute, and Councilmember Johnson, we'll get that information to you right away.
Sure.
Hold on, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have President Clark on the call, who, if you need a quorum, will temporarily appoint you to your committee.
We have the quorum, Councilmember Jones. What we need is someone to make a motion on the amendments and a motion on the bills.
So if he appoints me, I can.
Duly authorized.
I'm duly authorized, he said.
Okay, we're going to get the information over to you and Councilmember Johnson right away.
You got it. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Press.
1, 2. Copy the owners of this. Okay. Okay, and we need to strike.
Dave, please mute yourself while you're sending the information over. Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Jones and Johnson, you should have the script in your inbox right now. The clerk apologizes for the delay. The script needed to be changed during the middle of the hearing.
So what we'll do is start from the top.
So we'll start from page.
All right, thank you. So what we'll do is, again, we concluded the public meeting. We've already established a quorum, and now that we've established a quorum, the chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson for a single motion to approve the amendments to the bills that are being considered today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Offer an amendment to bill number 200710, 200711, and 210712. A copy of the amendments have been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that these amendments be approved.
Second.
Mr. Johnson, I apologize for the interruption. You read 210712. It's 200712. I apologize for the issue.
Okay, so let's take it back from the top. Mr. Chairman, I offer amendments to bill number 200710, 200711, and 200712. A copy of the amendments have been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that these amendments be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that the amendments to the bills just read by Councilmember Johnson be approved. All those in favor of the single motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion carries, and these amendments have been approved. The chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson for a single motion on the bills that are being considered today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that bills number 200710, 200711, 200712, 210280, 210326, 210327, 210451, 210472, 210502, 210504, and 210509, including any amendments that have just been approved, be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of these bills at the next session of council.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the bills just read by Councilmember Johnson, including any amendments that have been approved today, be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of these bills at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion carries. This concludes our Streets Committee hearing for the day. I want to say thank you to everybody for your patience as well as your flexibility. I appreciate the dialogue. This was some very important bills and legislation that was introduced today. The Streets Committee normally doesn't have this type of fun, but this was a very informative session. I also want to say thank you to the clerk for your flexibility as well. I know that there was some confusion, but I appreciate your patience and your flexibility. Thank you, colleagues. Yes.
This is Mark Squilla. I apologize. I did step away, but I'm thankful for the committee being able to pick that up. Great job today. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. We got a great team, and we had your back. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Jones, for pitch hitting for us. Everybody have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chief.